Welcome back. Tonight we are joined by some guests as we explore 4 of the creepiest stories that have happened in college or university. Here is Deburke with his retelling of a chilling tale.
It was nearly August. I had been accepted to the only school my parents made me apply to. Class was starting in just about 3 weeks and I wasn't even sure if I was going to go in yet. Despite my hesitance, on August 21st, after a long talk with my parents and some soul searching by the Pacific, I decided it was the smartest choice for my life. Due to the fact that I arrived so late, it was extremely difficult to find housing. There was no student housing left, so I was forced to find a place off campus. It seemed like a godsend when I found a 2-bedroom townhouse close to campus with a girl named Jay. I wasn't absolutely thrilled to be living with a random roommate after hearing so many roommate horror stories, and I wondered why she had no friends of her own to live with. So I was relieved to discover that she was simply new to the town as well. She was nice and usually kept to herself. We had different schedules. She worked nights and I had class all day, so it wasn't uncommon to not even see each other for long periods of time. She actually seemed totally normal. I settled in over the next few months, and between classes, making new friends and working part-time, I didn't even realize that I hadn't seen Jay in about 2 days. She kept her door shut a lot, so I decided to knock and check on her. I knocked twice and didn't get a response. "Jay?" I asked after about 3 seconds. Another few seconds passed and I still didn't hear anything, so I peeked my head into the door to see if she was okay. Perfume was grotesquely strong in the air, like she had doused the room. I saw her lying in bed under her comforter, facing away from me, but I could see her silky black hair. "Oh hi, sorry, I'm not feeling well," she croaked almost unrecognizably. I've totally lost my voice. I had felt bad for intruding, so I ducked out of there after quickly apologizing for waking her up. I did some laundry and met some friends for dinner. I came back around 9 p.m. and did some homework in my room. The perfume smell was starting to mix with something kind of bad. I opened the window to air it out and put it out of my mind. I woke up in the middle of the night to Jay's creaky, high-pitched giggling. It frankly sounded demented because of her hoarse throat. The sporadic eruptions of giggling continued and made it hard to fall back asleep. But I figured she was just redditing or something. Plus she was sick and I'm not really a confrontational person. Eventually I could clearly hear her rewinding then replaying the same 5 minutes of The Goonies. It was the part where the kids find Sloth. I finally fell asleep to weird Goonies-inspired dreams. I woke up late to my alarm clock and had to rush out of the house. But the perfumey, nasty smell at this point was almost overpowering. I knocked on the door again, and yet again there was no answer. I tried to peek my head inside, but this time it was locked. "Oh, don't come in right now, I'm changing," she wheezed out. "Jay, it smells horrible in here. Do you know what that is?" No, I'm so sick, I can't smell anything." "Okay, well, I'll figure it out when I get home." I had no time to deal with it. I would have to look around the house. Maybe we had an animal problem or some food had fallen behind somewhere in the kitchen. The day went by as normal. I talked to a professor about possibly becoming a teacher's assistant, met some friends from class for lunch, and headed home to lie around the house for the rest of the day. In fact, the day felt so average that it was hard to process what I was seeing when I came home to a townhouse surrounded by police cars and ambulances. What was going on? There was even caution tape like in the movies, and a news van. I walked my way up to a police officer, explaining that it was my house, asking what the deal was. "Ma'am, wait right here a second," he said, as he called for a detective on his radio. A detective walked down the steps and pulled me aside to talk. Again, I explained that I lived here, and he asked me how long it had been since I had been home. I told him I was home just this morning, and asked him why. He told me that Jay's parents had been unable to contact her for the past few days, and that they had called the police today to look for her. When they came over, the door was unlocked and they went inside to look for her. They found her body. Jay had been murdered. I was unable to process what I was hearing. "What do you mean? How could this happen? In the middle of the day? I just talked to her this morning." The officer's next words are something I hear every single time I turn the lights off at night. "This morning, miss? That's impossible. Jay's been dead for at least 3 days." This was extremely hard to write, due to constant anxiety, PTSD, etc. However, it kinda helped to get it out to somebody besides a gruff cop who thought I might have done something. Because, understandably I guess, it's hard to imagine that I did not realize that a man was living in Jay's room for 3 days after torturing, strangling, and then eventually mutilating her.
Here is MaddMike with his eerie recollection.
After I graduated high school, I decided to go to a music university that was in my home state. It was behind the mountains up north of the city I grew up in. When I got handed the brochure, it looked beautiful. Also being close enough to go back home to do laundry if I needed, or to finally get a good night's sleep maybe. Getting there was a pain though. It was not fun driving through a valley in the mountain range just to get there. Then it would be a little rural college town in the middle of the woods. There were 3 boys' dorms and 1 girl dorm. The girls' dorm was huge and newly built, while the guys had the same old small dorms. One of the first things I learned was that the college was built in 1883 and has some weird and scary history. With a university this old, everyone had their own little hunting story that happened to themselves. Stories passed around, and there's only 4 that still make me not want to step back on that property. My first friend there was Brian. I met him in our dorm's common room, and we drank a little together and eventually became friends and hung out often. He was actually a residential assistant during the soccer camp that happens there during the summer here. One thing he had was a master key. When he would go smoke in a staircase, he would always pass a big wooden door with a giant padlock on it on the side of the building. Living there through summer, he noticed it was always locked and looked like no one ever opened it, so he just left it alone. During the end of the 2nd month he lived there, many people had left and were closing the camp down. That meant not that many people would be around. He went out to smoke, and once he got past the big wooden door, he saw that the padlock was off of it. Looking and seeing the door slightly ajar, it slammed shut and Brian took off after. After that, he refused to step near that dorm again. He moved into mine. He said that every time he goes in that dorm, he always feels like someone is breathing down his neck. Sometimes if you get so bored in a weird rural town, it's fun to get some people to go check out an old house on your campus. An old house meaning it was built somewhere between the 1750s and 1800s and was rumored to have glowing lights in the house, even though there was no electricity. It was back behind the gym. You walk about half a mile till you get to a bridge that looks like it's from Sleepy Hollow. You cross it, and there will be a clearing bigger than a soccer field. The house was on the far right part, tucked into the woods. Brian and I were the first ones to see it in our little group. Everyone was bitching about the bugs, and we just wanted to eventually see what it looked like, so we went ahead. We got till about 40 feet away from the house and noticed the glowing globes at the same time. In an old decaying house, the glowing globes looked like flashlights glowing at us. Brian gave me a fuck this look, and I nodded. It felt like we were being watched, so we both turned around and started walking back to the gym. The others asked why we were leaving, and Brian just pointed and said, "Fuck that." 2 of the boys' dorms were haunted. The one that Brian lived in with the weird wooden door, and another one our friend Nick was in. Nick was the resident advisor in the other haunted dorm. He also went through when people were leaving the soccer camp. Maybe 14 out of 32 rooms in the dorm were taken, and he was on the 3rd floor. He was alone and heard someone bounce a ball right outside his door over and over. Finally, after opening the door, he found an empty hallway. They considered it evil because the dorm was built on a shack where a long time ago a 5-year-old girl was raped and killed there. I never stepped near that side of the campus and usually avoided that dorm for the rest of my time there.
This is that Creepypasta guy with his take on a disturbing story.
Back when I was in college, there was an old dorm that was empty and locked up. The 1st floor windows were covered up with thick black curtains and the doors had chains and padlocks on them. Well, my 2nd year of school I got my EMT certification and started working on the campus EMS squad. That was easily my coolest job ever, and there were perks other students couldn't get. One of those were the keys for everything. So obviously, we used those keys to get everywhere. Most places were pretty boring. My now best friend, who was the other EMT I worked with, decided to make the old dorm our hangout place. We would sneak in with friends and drink there on the weekends or nights where we didn't have class. We usually stayed on the first floor, on just one wing of the dorm, the one closest to the back entrance. We didn't stray because the place was dirty and had cobwebs. So one night we were drinking in the one room we set up with tables and chairs that we seized. We were all together. Nobody was missing when someone very close to our room loudly started screaming, "Who the fuck is there?" To which one of us drunkenly responded, "Who the fuck do you think it is?" A very confused voice responded back, "You're not coming with me then, John." They sounded like they were walking away from us towards the centre of the building, away from the stairwell. Incidentally, none of us were named John. A few minutes later we could hear on the floor above us, a very old building floor that's super thick, a rumbling sound that kind of shook the walls. The rumbling stopped right above us with a giant crash. Shit officially just got creepy. We all ran up the stairs to make our way to the hallway above that we were all hanging out at. Right at where our room would be on the first floor was a giant filing cabinet on wheels. It was just there. Nobody else was there. You could see the wheel tracks on the floor because it was dusty and shit, but there were no footprints besides our own. We all fucking bolted without getting our stuff. No stopping to get our booze, or turning off our radio, or turning off our battery-powered lantern. We obviously have to go back and get our shit. We waited a few days. A friend of mine and I went one evening to get it. First we go to the window to see if we can see any of our stuff in there. My friend looks in, but I didn't. He said he thought someone was in the doorway. I thought he was acting retarded because of what happened the other night. We sneak in and make it to the room to get our stuff. Somewhere down in towards the centre of the building, we hear a door shut. It's completely dark that way. We hear a door close or open, and we don't wait around to see what it was. So I'm not a person who believes in supernatural stuff, and the same goes for my friends. We decide that we need to figure out what the hell is going on with this building. So about 6 of us devise a pretty easy plan to go about with. We circle the building one night and check all the windows to make sure they're all locked. Then we went into our usual entrance. Left 2 people on the inside to make sure no one came in or out. Then the rest started going from dorm to dorm, checking to make sure nobody else was in there. We'd go, "Hello?" and obviously get no response. We make it through our hallway that we hang out at and our tensions ease up. One of the people at the outside door moves up to where we stopped and the second goes to the second floor where the filing cabinet was. Because it's back to the original place with no wheel tracks and no footprints. Tension in the group rises. We start doing the whole hello and no response thing again. We get about halfway through the hall and one of us gets the idea of saying, "Come on, it's your friend Johnny." There was then a giant thud behind us. Muffled screams from the 2 left as lookouts, probably saying something along the lines of, "What the fuck is that? Why a giant thud behind us on the same floor, when no one could have been, because we went through those rooms and would have noticed someone else slamming a door right behind us." It turned into a race to get back the way we came, past the doors that were just slammed. As we get into the hallway, we can hear doors opening and closing in a way that something was coming towards us from the centre of the building again. We get a few hundred yards away before we all stop running and make sure we had made it.
Join us, New Fusion, as we recall a crime that happened not too long ago.
Yale University. Influential, esteemed, Ivy League, and gruesome.
Since its founding in 1701, Yale University has been at the forefront of higher education. However, in its shadows, there lies tales of bloody murder and ruthless killings.
Tonight we shed light on one story that haunts the vast halls of Yale's campus.
Born in San Jose, California, Annie Lee was of Vietnamese heritage. She was due to marry graduate student Jonathan Wadowski in New York on September the 13th, 2009. Tipped to be the next Einstein, valedictorian and straight-A student Annie Lee had clinched a place in one of Yale's prestigious graduate programs.
On the morning of September the 8th, 2009, Lee made her usual morning commute to Yale's Sterling Hall of Medicine at 10 a.m. From there, Annie Lee's research lab was a short walk across the street. What was unusual about this seemingly ordinary event was the fact Annie Lee had left all of her belongings in Sterling Hall. This included her purse, credit cards, cash, and even her phone. Thinking that she was buried in work, her friends collected her items, in hopes of giving her them later on in the day.
Annie Lee was never seen leaving the building in which she entered. As the day progressed, her friends didn't think much of Annie's absence, putting it down to another long day at the lab. It wasn't until 9 p.m. that evening, when Annie still hadn't returned home, that her friends decided to call the police and file a missing persons report. Upon a brief police investigation of the research lab's CCTV footage, an order was given to lock down the building. The order was given simply because Annie Lee was not captured leaving the building by any of the 75 security cameras, and therefore must still be inside somewhere.
Due to the high security measures, the police decided to turn their attention to the students and employees, as they are the only people who were able to gain access to the building. After searching the building and coming up with nothing, the FBI got involved and decided to search the local dump where Yale's garbage was incinerated. This was also a fruitless endeavour. Turning their attention back to the building, a pile of bloody clothes were eventually found above a ceiling tile, enforcing their theory that foul play had taken place.
A couple more days passed, until finally, on her wedding day, 5 days after her initial disappearance, Annie Lee's lifeless body was found stuffed inside a lab wall, merely yards away from where the clothes had been hidden. A post-mortem autopsy revealed ligature marks around Annie's neck, the cause of death. Traumatic asphyxia due to neck compression, or simply put, strangulation. But who had committed such a violent act, and why would they choose Annie? The discovery raised more questions than it answered.
Upon investigation of the ID card scanner log, it revealed that a lab technician named Raymond Clark was working in the lab at the same time as Annie. To rule him out as a suspect, a DNA sample was taken, and he was later released. The very next day, a match came back, tying Raymond Clark to the scene of the murder. Clark was swiftly arrested and detained in a maximum security prison before standing trial. After several pleas of not guilty, Clark suddenly changed his story in a hearing in 2011. He pleaded guilty to the murder of Annie Lee, showing great remorse, yet offering no motive or explanation for his gruesome actions. He is currently serving 44 years imprisonment, due to be released in September 2053.
The mysterious case of Annie Lee's murder had come to a morbid closure. In a vastly ironic twist, one of Annie's last published pieces for Yale's magazine was entitled Crime and Safety in New Haven. If you like these tales, then follow the links below to some of the creepiest channels on YouTube. We've been New Fusion.
I've been CJ.
I've been LJ. Sleep tight.